the best we can do to understand, the best metaphors we can use, that there are minds that are being linked together in a way to believe that this is real when it's not. And it's being done for a very specific reason. And the big kind of conclusion to it, that all the work came down to and boiled down to, is the why. Why is this being done in this way by this group with us, right? Because I'm in it, you're in it, and we want to know why. And the big reason, it really is very elegant and very simple, that the big reason was to determine.
Hey, Inspire Tribe, my fellow freedom lovers. It's John Nolan here. Thank you so much for tuning in. It is Monday, June 15th, 2026. We're going, wow, way into the matrix and way out of the matrix into prime reality. This is literally the meat and potatoes of this discussion today. As you know, last week we did a show on the 3 paths that remote viewers saw are available to humans after death. And they're not excluding that there are more paths, but they found 3 paths. It was an incredibly interesting show and quite controversial. And today we're going to feature the findings of a group that was sort of surrounded, or a group of which Brett Stuart was a part of. And as you might remember, we featured a video of his last year, was very popular and also very controversial. And one of the big things that I heard from the first time from this remote viewing session was a very unique reason for why the matrix / simulation was created. And the fact that they're actually looking for something very specific with the simulation, with the matrix. A few disclaimers before we go. We edited out segments from this session from various clips of Brett's. And I want to start by addressing a little bit of the people that were very skeptical in our last video, and the folks that had very strong opinions on remote viewing. And I want to specifically address those who don't know a lot about it, right? If you don't know a lot about remote viewing, or anything for that matter, you can be skeptical, you can be interested, you can be inquisitive, you can be a researcher, you can be a questioner. But what you can't be is somebody who has an opinion on it. And, you know, to have an opinion on something you know nothing about really isn't, you know, it isn't good for anybody, not good for you. So I would encourage everybody who doesn't know much about how remote viewing works to actually look at the various techniques. It's a very strict method, and when followed is pretty scientific. So before we share the first clip of Brett Stuart explaining, you know, he's going to talk about reincarnation. He's going to talk about the matrix system. He's going to talk about what it actually looks like and where potentially, according to the data, our real bodies are versus these avatars. And he's also going to talk about the why, the who. Very, very interesting stuff. But in his own words, a short clip here about remote viewing that I think is a good introduction to the subject.
New to remote viewing.
Let's start this again.
New to remote viewing, there's 3 key concepts you need to know before looking at the session scans. Number 1, remote viewing is a method of technical intuition developed by the Stanford Research Institute, and it allows access to non-local information about any person, place, thing, or event through expanded perception. Number 2, remote viewers are specifically task blind. This means no foreknowledge of the topic is known by the viewer ahead of time, and all results, including the ones in this video, follow that protocol. And number 3, upon project completion, the viewer analyzes their sketches and descriptive data to assemble a final picture, comparing the results against what's known and what's not.
Ronnie, our dear friend, wonderful moderator, Ronnie is in a live chat today. And a lot of you wonderful folks who've been with us for so long, but Ronnie just wrote, pure consciousness. I agree, sister, pure consciousness. But remote viewing is a technique that people need to learn. And on these, just to give you a quick overview, and then we're going to go into the subject here. On any project, if it is a serious group of people that does this, you will have a number of viewers, sometimes 3, 4, 5, 6 or more viewers. They don't communicate with each other during their viewings, of course, and they will receive, each of them will receive a code or a number, a sequence that doesn't mean anything. But the person who says, hey, I want you group to look at a target, that person will have picked the target, and they can pick a location, they can pick a person, they can pick anything. And then they associate that target with a number or with a code, and the group of viewers only gets the code. So they have no idea what they're looking at. And then they go into their techniques, and then they view, expand, relax their consciousness into the data. And then they have sketches, and they have notes, and they have impressions, and they get words and images and all that. And then they gather all that data, they analyze it, and then they later come together and compare and contrast. And usually only at that stage is it revealed to them what they were actually viewing. So, you know, when a group of 6 people independently sees something very similar and has very similar data, that means something. The reason why we're looking into these remote viewing sessions when it comes to the before or the afterlife, when it comes to potentially the matrix, the simulation, reincarnation systems, is that we're in a very curious situation here in this realm, is that typically we don't remember anything from before we came here. And, you know, we have no memory of any other experiences consciously. Some people have glimpses into past lives, but that's the exception. And so we're flying blind, right? Remote viewing might be a modality that allows us to gather more data beyond what we can find within our realm in teachings, spiritual teachings, books, ancient traditions, and so forth, which is sort of hard to piece together where they fit into the puzzle. So remote viewing is just a very interesting form of exploration. And last piece of information before we look into Brett's data, and we're going to also talk about why he took everything down. He took all these videos down. They're hard to find these days. We're going to talk about that too. But the last piece is that we have, we're going to do an interview with 2 of the viewers from Intuitive Underground, the group that we featured last week. And we're going to bring them on in the next few days and do an interview with them and talk about the data and what they've found. So that's also upcoming. Now, without further ado, this is a compilation of various clips from Brett Stuart's where he talks about the viewing projects and what they saw. And here's the first one where he sort of speaks about reincarnation. Let's watch this together.
As far as reincarnation is concerned, from the work that I've done, it doesn't seem to be that reincarnating in the same place again and again and again without memory of previous reincarnations or previous lives is normal in the known universe. But that's something that's very not normal. It's something that actually keeps you from progressing. Because if you think about it, how are you supposed to learn a lesson or have a greater understanding if that whole previous life is completely unavailable to you? You have no access to it. It's not, other than at the most base unconscious levels. So it seems like a very poor system, right? And well, it's a poor system because it's designed that way. It's designed to keep people here, because keeping people here, souls here, whatever that is, feeds into a much larger system, and it powers that system. And this is a system that constantly is expanding and trying to create more scenarios like what we have here in other places on other planes, whether it's planet or something we can't visualize or comprehend.
Sorry, the data on this, and this is what I think, what is really good about all these clips here is that Brett Stuart really talks about the data that was gathered during the remote viewing sessions. There's not really any opinion in there, but the reincarnation thing is such a big one because, of course, we have the Eastern spiritual traditions who openly talk about it, and it is a part of the, you know, the karmic cycle and the wheel of samsara and the learning experiences, and Earth is a school, and you go through it over and over again and all that. And I believe that in and of itself, all these things are true. However, I believe they are a chosen path, not a prescribed path, a natural path that we have to take. In other words, I believe it's a system that was at some point created for a specific reason, but not by prime creation. And I would go as far as to say that we are at least tricked to stay in it when we can actually jump off the wheel. We can actually say, no, I don't want to participate in this system any longer. I've come to the conclusion that you can jump off the karma wheel. It is not universally necessary for you to go through all whatever the council and whatever authorities that are available there tell you. So that's the conclusion I've come to. I'm not necessarily saying that's the data, but it overlaps in many ways. And of course, the observation that we have no memory, that we go through a memory wipe. And it seems to be very stupid to have a system where you're supposed to learn on previous experiences without remembering previous experiences. It's kind of cruel, actually. It would be so harsh if your parents brought you up and they would teach you things and then they would, you know, have a little zapper and you forget what you learned, but they expect of you that you remember what you learned. It's a cruel system in and of itself to think about it. And I know that spiritually astute people who think that I haven't done any studies or meditations or spiritual maturing, if that's your opinion, that's fine, think that I'm ignorant. I'm not ignorant to the teachings. I'm not ignorant to the traditions. I'm just saying, what if it's a choice that you can make and not participate in it any longer? I'm going to leave that open-ended. Let's go into the second segment here, where Brett Stuart addressed the question, who is doing this? Once again, these videos are not widely available any longer on the internet. He took them down. We're going to talk later about why. But who is doing this? Like, who created this whole system, the matrix, the tricks, the traps? Well, let's see what he says.
PT51 was just the name, the handle that we gave it at the time. And this is on, it was what we refer to as a topical search on moksha. And moksha is a Sanskrit word. And it refers to emancipation, liberation, and release from samsara, which is the cycle of death and rebirth. And how that occurs. How does moksha occur? And this was just, we had no idea what it meant or what it was associated with when this came out. And so obviously all the remote viewing work was done blind. And what came out of this project showed two very specific things. It showed, number one, that what's been going on presently here is that becoming free from this cycle is seeing all of these lives again. And the description of the diagram is that a system has been placed, a net has been placed essentially around this reality that we're living in right now, Earth, if you want to call it that, and or larger reality. It seems to be this specifically focused on this planet, but that when you die, is the description we use a description of, it's like gravitational lensing for your light or your soul, where it bends you back. Where normally you'd leave and you'd go off somewhere else, but instead, because of this system is in place, it lenses you, curves your light back, and you come right back. You come back again and again and again and again, and it shows the drawings in the remote viewing data showed a very large cage with a whole bunch of a plethora of people, like it just showed many minds essentially trapped in this cycle again and again and again and again. And for context of how to get free, the big first part of that was becoming aware of what these past lives are. But as context of the why, this particular type of system of control, of sending people back again and again and then forgetting who they were, of souls, is that one, it fractures their soul again and again and again because they keep having all these different personalities that are constantly being remade over and over and over again. But that process feeds into a much larger system, that it's energetically being fed back up a chain, a supply chain, to somewhere way, way off in the distance, whether it's in the universe or dimensions. I couldn't tell you. But diagrammatically, it shows a chain between different. There's a symbol for Earth, and it's referred to as the chevron within a circle on top of it, which refers to Earth. And it shows the diagram. It shows all these lines, which referred to as a supply line, and all energy, like all roads, if you will, leading back to Rome. In this case, all this energy goes back to one place. And these supply lines, though, are being fed for conquest, as that there's an outward expansion from one place in the universe that is going outwards to then feed energy back to it. And what exists in that place we have lowercase gods, lowercase g gods. There's the best description we have for what these things are. These are things that used to be organic life forms, but their technology and their consciousness has advanced to such a degree that they're not even, you couldn't even call them necessarily they live in all this energy is essentially creating an environment for them that they're artificially living outside of time, inside of the universe. And so they essentially are immortal. But what these things are is not benevolent. These things, for lack of other word, this is essentially pure evil. As when you stick your nose into that and you start to describe what's there, is these things will look back at you very, very clearly. But when these things look back at you in a remote viewing session, they don't even care, because they look at you as such, you think of like a gorilla and a gnat. This thing is a gorilla, it sees the gnat. It's like, what a small mind. And that's the data point that comes back when you get the data streaming through in a remote viewing session of your remote viewing them looking back at you. What you'll get is you'll see them noticing you and then going, what a little mind. And then that's really it. Like, it's just no concern at all. Like, what a joke. But these are things, that's what is a key integral part of why a system of control, where this unseen hand originates from. With remote viewing, you can trace it all the way back. Well, where do all these roads go? And why? What is it for? What is it doing? Why is this constant cycle of souls being fractured again and again and again here to feed this larger system? Why is that occurring? And in this project, Moksha, the central aspect seems that the energy is being used to create an artificial, timeless environment for some type of life form that used to be organic, and allows them to exist in a space that we really can't even comprehend. The data point is just lowercase god. That's the closest we can get.
So this is one of the explanations that they found, or one of the reasons that they found during their viewing sessions, is this, obviously, this energy system that we've heard so much about, that, it sort of sucks energy, gets energy during our lifetimes that we produce mainly through emotional output, suffering being a big one. Anything that has an intensity puts out a lot of energy. And then while we are exiting the bodies, there's apparently a fracturing going on. And like he says, a fracturing of the soul through many lifetimes and so forth. And they have gone deeper in the previous session that we featured last week. They've gone a little bit deeper into that concept. But generally speaking, he also shared in his clip that he talked about this system, this grid, this overlay that we're experiencing, sort of this artificial thing that many people call a simulation or the matrix or so forth. And there's this disbelief by many people, and it's just like, this can't be possible, this can't be real. I get that, but I recently Christine and I recently watched a show, and of course we're looking for kind of these, if we're going to watch something, we're usually looking for something that we think might have some data in it that's interesting. So we watched a show called Paradise, and the premise of the show was that there was a geophysical event that a large number of scientists foresaw, and then this group of billionaires in collaboration with the government, secretly, of course, they created this underground bunker city in the mountains of Colorado. Now, it's very close to the truth, of course. You have Cheyenne Mountain, and you have all these real facilities. We all know these programs are ongoing, but they built this city in a way where once you were in it, it was a real city. It looked just like above ground because they had a fake dome that looked like a sky. It was a ton of like screens, but you couldn't tell. It looked exactly like your typical suburban city in America. And it had all the amenities, and it had the water, and it had power, it had everything. And Christine and I were debating, okay, so if you are among the first people who there is this emergency event on the surface and they go down into the city, everybody that went through that transition would know exactly what happened and that they're in an artificial place. But then the generation that would be born down there, now that's different. Depending on how the inhabitants would treat the children might or might not know where they are. But think about it. If this was going on for 3-4 generations, by the 4th, 5th generation, the idea that they're in an artificial place might be more of a myth than a reality, because that's all they know. If you have nothing to compare it to, and that's how we are here, we don't have a point of comparison. So we call this reality, truth, nature, whatever, but we don't know. It's like in the Truman Show, if you watched the movie, Jim Carrey playing Truman, same concept. He didn't have a frame of reference. He just had a feeling and intuition. And that's why he started asking questions, right? So for everybody who just dismisses the entire idea, I would stay curious. I would stay open, because it might actually lead you to the real thing. Okay, so this is kind of what I wanted to say here, but let's move forward to the next clip here, where he actually goes deeper into that.
Nutshell, what came back from that session work is that reality as we know it, again, it's using our understanding of that word and the meaning and the definition behind it. 3D physical reality is not, it's projected. It's not something, it essentially it confirms very much what exists out of ancient culture and their understanding on Maya, on how physical reality isn't real, the idea of dream. And everything that our work described is that reality is something that's illusory. It's something that's actually being generated in someone's mind to believe it's actually real. And then we actually described what's behind that and also the circumstances behind that. It's Matrix, stories from the Matrix. It's a funny parallel. That movie series actually got that word, Wachowski twins. They got the term Matrix from the declassified remote viewing documents. And, this is so fascinating. And they actually named the video there. I think in an old, you can go find an interview of them where they got the name. And it came out of the declassified Stargate documents looking into remote viewing. And so, the Matrix is not far off. It's different. I mean, it's very, very dramatized, but it's not far off.
So this was the comparison to the movie The Matrix. And I think it was from a Q&A session where he was asked, how close is it to The Matrix? And he said, basically, and he's going to go deeper into it, it's not far off. But there are 2 sentences, one from this clip and one from a previous clip that I wanted to discuss, where he says, reality is created in the mind, and minds are linked together to have the experience of a shared reality. And this is sort of, imagine this kind of language even 100 years ago would have been unimaginable for so many people. But today, think about it. Like, we are not, at least not knowingly, we're not in the hive mind yet, where everybody is plugged into the AI and everybody's fully readable at all times. It might be there, but we don't know it yet. But think about how we have social media, for example, and just this very live stream here. Think about it. We are now able to experience something together all over the world, no matter where we are right now together. This wasn't possible all too long ago, and especially before television or broadcasting. This was not a reality for most people because the technology didn't exist and they didn't have, the innate abilities awakened in them. So what he is describing, if you remember in The Matrix, the actual bodies weren't really in the matrix, but the bodies were hooked up to a system so that the projection would happen in the mind of each individual. And that's where they would experience this shared reality that they called the world and everything else. So it was a computer program, right? And boy, is that like, that's such a brain explosion to think about these things, and it can be overwhelming. But it's interesting that these data points keep showing up. And I believe in many ways, the ancient texts confirm that with the language. They call it a dream, Maya, the great illusion, the great dream. And once again, think about how many resets of civilizations have happened, how often context and language was lost in the process, and how rediscovery happened later. So we're going back and we're piecing the pieces of the puzzle back together, but we have information from various different time periods, traditions, backgrounds. We don't know what was manipulated and what wasn't. So that's why I think this remote viewing data is just so interesting, because it's not affected necessarily by these problems. Okay, so let's watch this next clip together, where he describes in detail what they saw, where we're going to get closer to the real reason, according to their data or his data, why this matrix actually exists. It's not just energy and looshing. There's something else going on.
First site template that I arrived at doing this session was a specific place. It was a specific place, and there was a lot of different elements going on here. The first element is I want to just kind of describe the environment that I'm looking at. The environment is an immense, an absolutely huge structure that resembles a factory. Now, this factory could be kind of akin to what you might, if you've seen pictures or videos of the inside of the Amazon factories, where there's just stretches of miles of aisles and automated things moving back and forth and shuffling and arranging and picking this off a shelf and moving it along. If you haven't seen these Amazon factories, you should go take a look, because they're pretty amazing. So where my unconscious is pointed to on this specific topic, this header, if you will, this URL web address of reality in the information database, is a location and a place that's describing an absolutely immense facility. And this facility, there's a number of things going on that are located here, and there's a number of actions that are taking place here. The number one is that it's occupied by two different sets of people. Number one, it's occupied by a set of people that is, for all intents and purposes, asleep. They are docile. They are in a condition or in a manner or state of being where they are not aware of what's directly going on around them. And I'll get back to that in just a second. The other group is, there's a second group of people that is aware. They're walking around. What they are doing is they are watching. They are operating, and they are actually described to, in my own terminology or my own lexicon, as caretakers. And so this is happening on such a grand scale that you would not be able to see everything that's going on in the facility from one vantage point. It's that immense. But going back to what is happening to these individuals that are in a docile, say, sleep-like state, is that they're actually inside of, again, we use similes a lot in this when we don't really have the exact words, but what's described as a sarcophagus. It's something that has a lid that opens up and can close, and the person or the people that are docile are laying down inside of these things. And inside these containers there's a chalky, fluidic material that they're enveloped in. And it surrounds them, it's compressed, but it's not doing so in a negative or harmful way. It's doing it in a way that actually provides and takes care of them as well. It takes care of their physiological, biological needs in some manner as they're laying in that present condition. But it's a little bit less. They're not sitting in a hot tub underneath the water. It's a little bit more invasive than that. What's described in our remote viewing data is that there are different outlets and ports and fibers that actually go into these devices, into these sarcophagi, if you will. And then what they do is it inserts into the individuals laying inside of them, into their bodies. And it wraps up from the base of the spine up and around in a spiraling motion from the base all the way to the top, this fibrous material that goes all the way up the spine. And what this part of the device, this is a device that's been designed and created. What the intent of this is to provide fuel and nourishment for those inside of it. Think of like an IV drip to that extent, is what it's the concept that's being described. This is taking place, though, if you think of the factory, it's not things that Amazon's selling online, is the factory are these containers of life forms in this condition, happening on an absolutely massive scale. And there's different shelves and rows, and there's a lot of different devices that are moving mechanically, that are grabbing them, pulling it off a shelf. And what it's doing is it's doing more than just taking care of them. It's also organizing them based on some predetermined set of parameters. So it'll grab one off the shelf, it'll move it to a different part of the factory, it'll grab another one, move it somewhere else. And it's all being watched and measured and calculated. And there's a lot of this evaluation of what's going on to these subjects, if you will, from this other group, which is essentially operating the facility. And this group, these watchers, is actually pretty interesting. We didn't explore them in too much further detail, but a lot was alluded. Sometimes, this is the thing with remote viewing, is that you touch on a specific topic and you get a lot of information that answers that question, but then there's like, here's another morsel. There's a little bit more here. It's like, oh, you could explore this, and it's almost you go down the rabbit hole forever with this sometimes, because there's always a little bit more that you could do. It's almost like a lure. Come look at this part. And this also popped in the session work, where it's described a little bit of the scenario or the dynamic of, say, these watchers or these caretakers, of where they're doing this and why. And where they're doing this is actually in a secluded place. It's in a place that's being done off the beaten track, if you will, out of sight from, if you think of oversight, is that it's being done in a location where it's like if you're a scientist and you want to do human experimentation, you can't do that at Stanford because they would say, how dare you? You cannot do that here. It gives that kind of a feel for the location, is that they're off the beaten path and they're secluded away from whoever it is that would be an authority that say, no, you could not do this for whatever reason. And the reason they're doing this is because they're trying to circumvent some sort of problem that they're facing, some sort of larger ramification or some larger conflict that's going on. They're trying to find a solution for it through this. And they refer to it themselves as a proof of concept. It's the first of its kind, and they're trying to solve for some grander issue that they're confronting. This is different from those who are inside the sarcophagi. This is the watchers' mindset. We get into their minds a little bit and from where they're coming from. And so that's what essentially is going on when you have reality point. What is that? What is the information database? What is associated with that pattern of information of reality? Is it points us to a location where a whole bunch of subjects are in comas. And in these comas, so they're being taken care of in this fluidic material. They're being watched. They're being organized. There's a lot of measuring and complex calculations that are going on. And it's happening on an absolutely massive scale. And it's being done so because those who are operating it think that by doing so they can solve a cosmic problem, some massive issue that they're confronted with, and that they think, they guess, they suppose that the activity that's going on here, what they're doing, will solve for that problem. It's important to understand that this is using my vocabulary, as well as other viewers. They have to line up, right? But we have a human understanding of what an experiment means and what it looks like. And so it may be that my unconscious, not that there's a Amazon factory somewhere in time and space and they're doing it. I mean, maybe there is, maybe that's what it means, but that's the vocabulary that was used to describe the scenario, to paint the picture for me as clearly as my unconscious can, to give me accurate information about the target.
Oh my goodness, there's so much to unpack here, but I want to start with when he started describing from the remote viewing data what this place that they propose we all are actually in. You know, when he talked about these people in the sarcophags, he's talking about us, essentially. Maybe not all of us. Maybe there's different mechanism, which I presume, but let's talk about the data, right, that they found. And this could be, again, this is just a depiction, obviously, so we don't know, but look, no, that's not it. This is it. Look at this here. Just as a visual, obviously, it might not look anything like it, but just as a visual as to what actually is going on there. But there was an interesting thing that he said while we're looking at this here. And it's something reminded me of, I've had plenty of conversations with Greg Braden. We've done plenty of interviews with him, and also off camera we've talked a lot, but we never got to do the one where we really dive into the simulation, the matrix. And he's been talking about this on and off for years. And one thing that he always said, and it always stuck with me, is he said that this might be a simulation to test or learn something from this here that is needed outside of it. And if you think about it, when we create a simulation, humans create simulations of virtually everything, like humans simulate everything. And the first step of simulating something is usually to test something. So you simulate an environment so you can safely test something before you try it in quote unquote the real world. Safety testing for cars, everything is simulated, and then they go into the real world and try it and so forth. So think about it from that perspective, because people are so quick to just want to go bad guys, good guys, evil demons and all that. But let's for a moment just presume that some intelligence beings, he described them as the watchers or the people that exist outside of time but inside the universe, are trying to solve a problem. Maybe it's very selfish. They're just trying to solve a problem for them. So they've created an environment in which they can test over and over and over again certain conditions to see what would happen. We say, hey, this life lasts 80, 90, 100 years. But what if outside the simulation, outside this experience, that's just a few seconds or a few minutes? You know what I mean? Or time doesn't exist altogether. So I think we have to ask the question, what would be the reason, right? And so one reason was that through this entire mechanism, especially the reincarnation and the loosh, they're extracting energy. Okay, so that's one reason. The second reason is that they are testing something. They're trying to solve a problem. So maybe this is one of multiple simulations where they're running programs and we're going through them, seeing what happens. Okay, so this is interesting to think about. Now let's go into an even deeper potential for why this is happening.
How the life forms in the first place got to that docile condition. And this was in the data as well, in where they were not there because they necessarily chose to be there. It actually shows them originating in those canisters. It's like they're grown in those canisters from an early development stage. There is no other reality they knew other than this one that, we have to make a postulate at this point that the reality then is all in their minds because it's trickery and confusion that's being put on them by the specific scenario. But you have to presuppose that how they got there, they didn't have a choice. There's no choice in that specific thing. There's no choice in their environment. And so they're actually described as being chained to it. It's like they have handcuffs on. They didn't have a choice in being in those sarcophagi in part of this experiment because they were grown from inception in this experiment. Now, whether or not they could get out of that, I mean, that's a whole different potentially question. But they're grown from like a young age to maturity in these canisters, just like the Matrix, just like the movie. The difference, though, is that the Matrix says, well, it's for, what's the reason, right, for the actual devices themselves. And the Matrix says, well, it's to produce energy for robots, right? Well, that's not at all what's in the remote viewing data. What's in the remote viewing data is that what's going on in the minds of the watchers or those who are running this experiment is that they have a much grander problem they're trying to solve, that they're being confronted with, and that they think that this experiment will give them the solution to that. This will potentially solve, and they have to do it kind of outside of the authority structure or the oversight parameters of whatever that place is to do this experiment. And then that will do an end run around the problem, is what they believe. And so they're not being used as batteries. In fact, they're being used as a solution to some grander problem. But why are we in these containers having this experience, which is this trickery, this confusion, this masking or overlay? And why would they be growing life forms inside containers? Why would they be organizing them in different sects and groups or classifications inside the factory? Why would this be a proof of concept? Why would they need to develop this in the first place? Well, we actually did look at that, but it definitely adds a different layer to the story. It's a much grander kind of cosmic play that's kind of going out.
And as far as the best we can do to understand, the best metaphors we can use, that there are minds that are being linked together in a way to believe that this is real when it's not. And it's being done for a very specific reason. And the big kind of conclusion to it, that all the work came down to and boiled down to, is the why. Why is this being done in this way by this group with us, right? Because I'm in it, you're in it, and we want to know why. And the big reason, it really is very elegant and very simple, is that the big reason was to determine whether you're good or whether you're bad. That's apparently existing outside of this reality. It's not possible to determine that. For some reason, and that this experiment, I'm sure there's a plethora of other reasons, but the underlying purpose that we got back with our remote viewing work, why this exists in this way, is to determine whether you're evil or whether you're good. And that based off of the life you have here, based off the experiences, the circles, again and again and again. I mean, there's way more reasons that, I can spend hours talking about that came out of the work. But the big one, the original one, came because of that. It's to see who you really are. What are you really made of? And that this is essentially a simulation to determine that, so that those outside of it can know. Now, I don't know whether or not you agreed to that or whether or not I agreed to that, but it seems to be the case. At least that's what a remote viewing data came back describing.
This one actually blew me away, because in this context, I've never heard this before. This is the first time that I've heard this. And the one danger that we all run while exploring something is that we get certain about a specific fact, and then we no longer question it. So this entire session is an invitation to sort of reopen the can and reorganize what we already know and add new information to it. So this one is interesting because it makes you think, and I would encourage everyone to actually think about it. Why, let's just take this data that they found. Again, this is a group of people finding this data. Let's just take it at face value for a moment. Let's just say that they found that one of the big reasons why this simulation exists is to determine who is good and who is evil. Why would you need to do that? I thought about it. I walked with it. And one of the reasons I came up with is so that you could filter out the evil parts, the parts that have maybe disconnected so far from original consciousness, so that you wouldn't endanger the universe, reality, Earth, prime reality. Maybe this is a filtration process. And in that sense, isn't it interesting? It sort of overlaps a little bit with the religious, story of hell and heaven and sinners and believers and so forth. A little bit. There's a little bit of that in there, good versus evil. But the thing that stands out to me about this entire session and all the other sessions is that whenever spiritual traditions are discussed, whenever, these things are discussed, it's always in the realm of metaphysical, spiritual, woo-woo. The language changes. This is for people who believe. This is for the spiritual folk. But the way that they describe it has very little to do with that. It's very methodical, right? And so it is also an invitation for everybody watching to come to sort of peace with the fact that very concrete, if not even more real things exist outside of our experience here, and that includes factories and matrix growing pods and artificial suppression systems and so forth. So we're being invited to actually see that beyond this realm, reality continues to expand, not only spiritually in the heaven realms, but it continues to be also deceptive, apparently.
I don't understand. I don't understand what you're saying to me. You're here and you're also on Earth. And I was kind of getting confused about, like, I saw my body and yet I'm walking around here, and it was starting to not make sense to me. And so this guide that was with me said, okay, I'm going to show you the next space. I think you're ready. So this is when he took me back to the elevator. And I want to see if we went to the elevator, and it's like we went down and forward. It was a weird motion. And I don't know if that matters, but I want to say it out loud for anybody else who's experienced this, because I think they'll remember. We went in and kind of forward. And when it opened up, we opened up into this enormous room that felt like it was impossible that it could be anywhere because it was so big. And I couldn't figure out how they could fit this room anywhere because it seemed like it was its own dimension, honestly. No ceiling, no walls, but stacked on top of each other were these pods. And the pods seemed to be glass, capsule shaped, and they had people in them. The people were I remember them to be naked, but when I have gone back in meditation, I saw them wearing like white underwear and a white undershirt. So I might remember it wrong, but when I've gone back in meditation, that's what I saw. Now, when I was there were people walking around who were monitoring these pods. And then the row of pods would then shift, and then the next row would be monitored. So these people would walk around and with like a clipboard and make sure that the levels of, because these bodies were in some sort of water, clear water.
And were the bodies like lying down, or were they standing up?
Standing up. Standing up. And then sometimes the arms were like floating, and sometimes the arms were like up above. They were just there. And sometimes the eyes were open, sometimes the eyes were shut, and that was weird. Yeah. And then when the eyes were open, you could see the eyes looking around.
Oh.
Like they were in REM sleep.
What percentage would you say of the eyes were open and moving around?
Oh.
Like a small percent, or?
I don't know.
Okay.
Let me see if I can go back. So I'm going to look in my blueprint here and see if I can access that file. Angel on my right side, can you take me back into that memory file? This will just take me a minute and my face is going to go funny. So I'm just looking at that first row, and if there are 1,000 in that first row, I can only count, I can really only stand in front of 20. And I'm counting 1, 2, 5 of them, 6 have their eyes open. Okay.
Conscious or in some sort of sleep state?
Sleep state.
Okay.
None of them are conscious. None of these beings are conscious, except the ones with the clipboards. But all the beings in pods, they're all humans. All the humans in pods. I'm being corrected, actually. They're not all humans. They're in human bodies, but they're from different planets. Just like I said in the beginning, when I had my first NDE and the angel said, look, you're special, honey, but everybody on Earth is from somewhere. So even though all these pods were presenting in human form, what's inside of us, they could be Pleiadian, they could be Lemurian, could be angelic, but they were in a human body with boobs and penises, right? But that was their avatar form. But what I'm being told is, even though we all come from source, we all have different lineages. But I hope that answers your question.
Yes.
And then I'm also being told by, who is this speaking to me? Archangel Gabriel, that there's really nothing behind it. It's just how some bodies work. So when some people are in that's weird. He's calling it like catatosis. Catatosis. I don't know that word. Catatosis. That feels made up, guys. That some people's eyes just open, and that the fluid that they're in mimics ambionic fluid.
Okay. in the when you're in the womb. It sounds like catatonic when he says
Yeah, right.
right? Reminds me of that word.
And then so there are several people in, I feel like I remember them in white coats, but my ego might be making that up. So I'm just going to let somebody else who's been there kind of fill that in. But as they were taking care of these people, and it felt very prayerful, because they put their hand at the glass and not just look at like the numbers of them, but also, I mean, it was loving. It was loving. And then the whole row would rotate at once, and then they do the same thing. And there were so many workers there. And I got the feeling that there were workers assigned to just a few of these pods. So if you were a worker, you had the same 100 pods that you looked after. And I just got chills. That's my yes. So I was scared at this point. How do you, even though it felt like I could see it was loving, like, come on, I'm seeing bodies in pods. This is like horror movie stuff. So I'm starting to question, like, what am I seeing here? Is this a trick? And maybe it is. Maybe this is the manipulation you're speaking of. Maybe. But what I was told was everybody that I saw on Soul Exile 13, they are not in a pod. Their physical bodies are walking around. You met them, you saw them. But everybody on Earth, their bodies are in a pod. Everybody on Earth, currently, they're in a pod. Now, that doesn't mean that they're all on Soul Exile 13. They could be someplace else. They could be existing in a dimension someplace else. But they said that everybody on Earth right now, this is all a hologram, and their physical being is well taken care of in this stasis, this place of stasis. And that they told me, this guide told me, that this is not a prison. It's something we chose because Earth blew up. It's no longer habitable. And there are other places that we can go. So there is an option to wake up and have an incarnation on a different planet, if one believes something like that. So, we're not locked into this experience, but one can have a physical experience someplace else. But these humans that I was seeing, their story right now is that they are having an Earth experience, a very real experience, but it's holographic. It's haptic feedback. So when they want to sit their butt on a chair, they feel it right as they're sitting down. They're creating the world as they want it. And that's as drastic as your house isn't there until you pull up to it. I mean, we are literally creating. And that sometimes people are waking up now early because we are becoming enlightened. And there are structures that are part of that matrix we chose that have become corrupted, as things do, simply because the original framework that we created that was to help us make sense of big things like source is love, which that structure, let's look at that as religion. Well, what if religion was created to help us make sense of something so big as source is love, but within that structure it started to oppress people? And so people are waking up to, I don't want that anymore. And that desire of, I don't want that anymore, is also waking up your physical body in the pod. So it wakes up your vibrational body that feels physical here. So when enough people are waking up, they create an orientation. And then when you wake up over there on Soul Exile 13 and you are reoriented, they give you a chance after you know what the deal is, after you've had a chance to reorient yourself and see what your life could be like on Soul Exile 13. They say, okay, now here's your choice. You can either go back to your Earth life or you can stay here. But if you choose to stay on Soul Exile 13, it's final. You cannot go back. I asked the question, okay, if I stay here, well, am I dead on Earth? Because I have kids. I'm in love with my husband. Like, what happens there? This is the reason why I came back. They said you would have an avatar version of you, like a fractal version of you. All of your memories, all of your thoughts would be downloaded into the version of you that's right now sleeping in bed, that body. And it's likely that no one would know the difference unless they are spiritual.